Be warned, this book will break your heart. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Harry's Book Cafe. Today I want to talk about Anna Jones's 2019 novel, The Woman in White Kimono. So the story is essentially a love story, a sad one at that. It has somewhat a happy ending, but it's not the perfect ending that you and I would be looking for. It is a story based in Japan after the Second World War. I think it's around about 1950s to 1960s. There are two characters in the book, the Japanese woman Naoko and the American soldier Hajime. At the time the book was based, Japan was still under the American occupation, and during a break, the American soldier Hajime came ashore and started wandering around the ancient streets of a Japanese city. And whilst he was walking around, he met this woman in kimono, and it was love at first sight. And lucky for Hajime at the time, the woman was reciprocated very much from Naoko's perspective. They clicked immediately and they started to date, and to Naoko, Hajime represented something, modern, a breath of fresh air, so to speak, because at that time the Japanese society was the structure of the society is very much structured. The hierarchy is clearly defined. You're not supposed to step outside that boundary. Everything is predetermined about your marriage, about your schools, everything. In fact, Naoko was arranged married to someone else, another Japanese guy. But she didn't really care about the consequences. She started, as I said, dating the American guy. They were having a lovely time. She was showing him around the Japanese areas and teaching him the language. As I said, to her, it was really just a breath of fresh air. And she fell for him completely. And as I said, the Hajime was head over heel for Naoko as well. So much so that they decided to get married. Now, as I said, Naoko was arranged married to someone else, a wealthy family. Naoko's family is wealthy as well. Her dad had a huge business. Unfortunately, that business was struggling at the time of where the novel was based. So it is essential for Naoko to do her duty, to marry the Japanese guy. They have arranged it because the Japanese guy's family is very wealthy indeed. And to make the matter even more important, his family is actually the biggest customer of Naoko's father's business. So if she were to break out that marriage, then her decision will have a vital negative impact on her dad's business, and it's something that cannot be allowed. However, to humor her, their family decided to sort of initiate a meeting. So basically, at the time, when you want to get married in Japan, you need to have something called pre-marriage dating, or almost like meet the parents sort of event. Except if you think that's dreadful in the Western world, in Japan it's very, very formal. It involves in the girl's parents meeting the boy with the girl present, and also there's very complicated tea ceremony and conversation. Everything is designed to suss out the male's character, his knowledge, his mannerism, his status and station in the society. The meeting was vitally important to both parties involved. Weeks and weeks before the actual meeting itself, Naoja taught Hajime all the little nitty-gritty stuff, the language that needs to be used, what chopsticks to use, when to use that chopstick, the tea ceremony, what does it involve, how he should address his parents, what he should do, what his body language should be. So it's a very complicated set of rules that Hajime, if he wants the love of his life, he has to follow those rules. But being American, he's naturally playful, so he sort of learned this lesson half-heartedly, but he still managed to remember most of it. It's very funny, you know, how the Japanese woman, she was very serious, and how he was sort of like half-heartedly play around with it. So it's very, very interesting, that part. I enjoy that. It's one of the few light-hearted moments in this immense book. Unfortunately for them, Japanese society, even today, still has that sort of us and them mentality. There's one team that's Japanese and the other team that's the rest of the world. And that sentiment was much, much, much stronger at that time the book was based than it is today. But as I said, even today that sentimentality is ever present. For instance, let's give you a quick example. Today, if you are a non-Japanese and you wanted to rent an apartment, say somewhere outside Tokyo, not Tokyo, but say Kyoto, Osaka, Sentai, anywhere that's not Tokyo, then you are likely to be refused the place. Even though you go to an estate agent, every paper is correct, the landlord will then have the final say. 40% of the time, the landlords might very well reject you based on your nationality. And that's today. So back then, was much, much worse. Anyway, so the meeting was set up, the tea ceremony was set in their classical Japanese garden. Everything is serene and beautiful, except human emotions. Now, Naoko was super nervous, the parents was expressionless and wants to get rid of the meeting as soon as possible so that they can move on to the actual meeting with the other Japanese family. Anyway, what Naoko failed to tell their parents was that Hajime was an American. Now, you can imagine, they don't like foreigners, right, at the time. Especially not Americans, because they see Americans as enemy. So the moment that Hajime walks into the garden, there's audible gasp from her parents. They could not believe it. He was American. He was an American, and they could not believe that the daughter failed to tell them. They were so angry. The dad, Naoki's dad, stood up immediately and basically pointed at the door and says, get out of my house. Get out of my house right now. And after said that, he stormed back into the house. He was so angry. He was apoplectic. That meeting ended in complete failure, but it did not stop the two lovers' determination to get together and to get married. So what they did is they eloped a little bit and got married with a priest. You can imagine what happened next, right? So she effectively got kicked out of his property. Now, story gets more heartbreaking and complicated from that moment on. They managed to, let's say Hajime, the American soldier, managed to rent a place somewhere just outside the town where she was located. Now, that place has a very deep stigma attached to it. Now, the reason for that is because that place was effectively rented by people called half-halves. So they are basically Japanese women left with a mixed blood child, and because of the stigma attached, they cannot rent anywhere. To the Japanese society at the time, those women who had born children of American soldiers were seen as traitors, and they were effectively outcast. So they had nowhere else to live, so they got this little ghetto outside the town and called half of town. Now, the American Hajime was ignorant of the fact. He was still ignorant, and after his rejection, he still maintained that optimism and that innocence. So he rented this place, and Naoko, having come from a wealthy family, was at first reluctant to live in that place, but she was happy nevertheless, because as long as Hajime was with her, she's happy wherever she lives. So they lived in that sort of area, and those two people, Hajime and Naoko, they're so innocent. They're young and innocent. You know, they still think that the parents will eventually accept him into the family and accept her, allow her to go back into the family. You know, they sat down in their house and living happily and planned all the future, what they're going to do, how they're going to achieve what they wanted, how they're going to overcome their parents' rejection and worm their way back into the family, so to speak. So they are still full of hope. What happened was that Hajime needs to go to... So there are political problems in Taiwan. So as an American sailor, he was called back to duty and he has to patrol the Taiwan sort of stream. And the tour was supposed to last 3 months. By this time, Naoko was pregnant with his child and he was super happy. So he was called back to serve the American Navy, away for 3 weeks. Naoko was then called back by her family. Her family was basically pretend to ask her to go back so that in the name of taking care of the child. But it was actually a ruse. What happened then is they took her to a place in another city that's supposed to take care of pregnant women. They, to sort of like a clinic, are they, to basically check her up and see everything that is okay, the child is okay, the mother is healthy. And so Naoko went with this Japanese boy who she's supposed to marry. The Japanese boy, contrary to my belief at the time, was actually a very, very attractive guy, very nice as well, polite and quite understanding. When Naoko told him about her plan to get married with this American guy, he was quite understanding. He said, okay, yeah, tall, gold hair, blue eyes, who wouldn't? But deep down, he still loves her very, very much. He loves Naoko, but he was such a big man with a big heart. He was quite willing to let Naoko go and marry this American guy just so that she can be happy. Anyway, so he took her by the instruction of the family to this pregnant clinic to check her out and see if she has any problems. And the clinic turns out not to be a clinic at all. In fact, it was a place run by a terrible woman, a demon woman, who took the baby away as soon as women give birth. And all of the women who give birth, all the children were mixed race. So it is a way to get rid of the kids after the abortion age was too late. So this is a place where women give birth to mixed race children, and the woman killed them the moment they were born and buried them in the backyard. Now, the Japanese boy who's in love with Naoko, he didn't know that. The family does. So he was very much a victim of this shenanigan as well as the woman herself. And then he was refused entry and told to go home. Naoko then struggled in there. The truth she slowly came to understanding what this place is, and she tried to escape. Her second attempt was successful. She ended up in this temple with the help of monks and nuns to actually give birth to the child. All this time, she was in that sort of clinic for at least 6 months, I believe. All this time, she only had one thought, or two thoughts actually, to keep the child alive and to go back to the dwelling so that she can meet up with her husband, Hajime. She was constantly worried that Hajime might thought she ran away or she has changed her mind and all that sort of stuff. So she was in constant torment, emotional torment. By the time she finally got back there, her property was rent out to someone else, and she asked neighbors. She said the neighbor told her it's because the house was unoccupied for so long that the landlord decided to rent to someone else. And bad news for her is that Hajime never came back. She was completely destroyed. She doesn't know what's happened. She loved him so much, and from the story, I know that he loved her very, very much too. So I don't know what happened. The story did not specify what happened to Hajime. And that was basically the end of her parts based in the historical time. What happened is the book is actually divided into 2 parts. So chapter 1 is 1950s Japan. Chapter 2 is present day USA. And the present day USA is written from a American woman's perspective. She's young, she's like in her 20s and stuff. She is Hajime's daughter. So Hajime died of I think lung cancer, and on his deathbed, he told her about the story of his love adventure back in Japan. And she know that he actually have another child with a Japanese woman. So she realized she actually has a half-sister, and she was determined to find out who her half-sister was and make acquaintance and meet the woman her dad loved. So her journey started back in USA with a little bit, she was an investigative journalist, so she was quite skilled at digging out stuff. And with the help of a Japanese colleague, she was managed to locate the house where Naoko lives at present day. She was in her 80s, and she was, I think not 80, sorry, in her 70s, and she was still very much alive. So Hajumi's daughter, American daughter, came to Japan, located Naoko after some difficulties. And that moment where Naoko, the Japanese woman, recognizes her because of her eyes and also because of the scarf, the red scarf that the Hajumi's daughter tied around her neck. Because that red silk scarf, it was the gift that Naoko gave to Hajime as a parting gift, and told him that he has to return the scarf and therefore almost guarantee his safe journey back. But obviously it didn't work out. The scarf came back 30 years too late. And that was perhaps the saddest part of the story, you know, that Naoko recognizes who she was, who this American woman was, and saw the scarf on her neck and understood everything in that instant. And, you know, even today, I find that passage very, very difficult to deal with. Sort of a happy ending was that Hajime, Naoko, the Japanese woman, married the Japanese boy. So when the American daughter and Naoko sit down for tea and catching up all the stories, a Japanese old man shuffled in. The American woman thought she recognized who he was, and that turned out to be the Japanese boy who always loved Naoko. They were married. Happily for Naoko, they were in love and got married. Even with that sort of ending, I still felt, you know, there are things that were missed. What could it be? What could their past and present and future be if they got married? You know, Hajime and Naoko, if her parents wasn't so stubborn and intransigent, what their future would be. Would it have been better than her life now? I mean, that's the question that no one can answer, right? But you just can't help but wonder. And I hate the fact that when they have true love and you can't no matter what, be together. And it's just one of the, if not the most frustrating thing in life. But anyway, so her mission in Japan was to find her half-sister, right? I'm not going to tell you what happened. You will have to read the story to find out. Needless to say that it will be a massive surprise. I urge you to read this book only if you can handle the heartbreak, because it is heartbreaking. Immense book. I loved it. It's such an amazing book. I can't recommend it highly enough. In fact, the story is based on real event. You know the clinic I told you about where the baby was taken care of the moment they were born, and the woman buried the dead bodies in her backyard. With each body there is a stone statue to guide their afterlife, and the statue is very much like those ones here. So when I saw these statues, it gave me a little bit of a shiver, because that's exactly how they guide what they were looking like. They guide the dead babies to the next life. But yeah, so many elements, including the dead babies clinic, were actually based on real events. What do I think about the book itself? I think it's fantastic. It is sad. As I said, the ending, although it is happy, it is not the ideal ending that we wanted. The writing style is absolutely amazing, is flawless, easy to read and direct. It's quite a large book though. It's around about 500 pages, I believe. So it might take a while for you to actually finish reading it, but then it is essential to set up the scene, to set up the culture and everything, so that the reader can more fully appreciate the culture aspect of Japan at the time. And being a story that's based on actual event makes it even more potent. I love the writing. The only thing that I wish is if the writer can have more description of the place that the book was based in. I would like to a little bit more about, the physical Japan, the character. I wish to have the place as a separate character. If you know what I mean. At the moment, I intellectually I know that it's based in Japan, but there's no much description to set it apart. That's the only criticism of the book. Other than that, I absolutely loved it. If you look at behind me, I can just picture the story unfold somewhere like this. Although the book is not based in Kyoto, I'm right now in Kyoto. Although the book isn't based here, but you can just get the sense that this is somewhere the book would have unfolded if the writer has provided a little bit more physical descriptions of the place. But yes, other than that, it is the perfect book. It is sad, but I strongly recommend that give it a go. Give it a go fully. Yes, that's it guys. Until next time, cheerio.